Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Pet Shop Boys' album from 1999 called Nightlife. So far this is the fourth time I've reviewed a Pet Shop Boys album on my channel, and the ones that I've reviewed have been fantastic, and I just happen to, I'm obviously a huge fan of Pet Shop Boys, and I've been so since probably I was 9 years old when they first came out in like 1985, 10 years old, and Please came out. I had just heard West End Girls shortly before the album came out, and they've been one of probably my top 5 influences as far as electronic music in my early listenings. Up to the point where I was probably about 20 years old. So I've followed Pet Shop Boys hardcore since the very beginning, and especially through their first 10 or 15 years. And strangely enough, Nightlife is sort of where things changed for me, and I'll kind of get into that through this album. Through this review. There's 4 topics that I really want to touch on this video besides reviewing the album and reviewing the tracks. This might be a little bit long video, but we'll also get a chance to hear the album in its entirety, and you'll see my scores on it if you've never heard this album and you like to listen for yourself and also review it along with me. You see my scores down, my rating system down in the notes section below. I always put that in my videos so you can follow along and see if you'd like to review it yourself. But there's 4 things I want to talk about specifically in this besides rating the tracks, and the first one is Pet Shop Boys up to this point back in 1999, my experience with them. But not going too in depth but just about their albums to that point. I also want to talk about the downfall of the maxi single, which is something that I'll probably do a separate video on because it's very impactful for me, and I think it's a snapshot of a time for electronic music and dance music, and especially the remix. Was a very exciting time for maxi singles. The third thing I want to talk about, of course, is the album. And then the fourth thing I want to talk about is how Pet Shop Boys have always maintained being hip. And I'll kind of dig into that a little bit at the end. So first off, Nightlife, they started off, with Please, and I gave that album, that's one of the 3 albums I scored. I gave Please an 85 out of 100, which is excellent, right in between excellent and an all-time classic. I gave Behavior an even stronger score at 87, which is probably their best album of all time. Although, until I rated Please, I wasn't sure which one, would be first. And, just by 2 points, Behavior kind of squeaked it out. And then the third album I've reviewed is Very, and that one also got an excellent score of 81. So just 3 fantastic albums in their career, and probably for the most part, along with Actually, most Pet Shop Boys fans would say those are probably their four best albums. And when you think about those are their first 4 albums in general, and those are the 4 best albums that most people would probably pick, you can kind of see partly what's coming on with the later 90s and sort of, I wouldn't say the downfall of the band, but just kind of, for a lot of different reasons, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the last part of the video of staying hip. But Please was excellent. Actuality was excellent. Obviously Introspective and Disco were good extra albums to sort of get you through into the next album, and then Behavior came. They had a little bit of a lull in 1989 after such a huge success, and unfortunately, the pop media, in my opinion, they sort of got ostracized for being gay, and then a lot of dance music doesn't get the respect that it deserves in pop music and in the media, and the combination of those 2, and maybe not quite the hits that Actuality and Please had, and then always by the 3rd, 4th album, there's always, you're not the hippest band anymore. There's other new music out there. You're kind of old hat. You're kind of, you're not today's flavor of the media, and getting all these accolades and all this media love. You started getting your third, fourth album, and which was really sad because Behavior, their third album, was fantastic, and it did get, from the people that did listen to it and actually paid attention to it and gave it the time, got really good reviews, and rightly so, because it's a fantastic album. And then they totally, they had a lot of good singles in there, and then Disco 2 came out after Very, and Very was, in some ways, a triumphant album in a lot of ways, and sort of, they almost had like a different peak with Very. It was a more of a techno album, more of a late night album, but they were able to sort of align their music with what was out at that time and still kind of sound very Pet Shop Boys, and it was a strong success. And then Bilingual came out, and you started to see a little bit of the cracks. Although there's some good songs on there, you started to see, maybe other bands got your attention, and that was partly a big thing for me in 1997 when Bilingual came out. I was 21, so I was going to clubs, and I was really into dance music, and Pet Shop Boys was like your grandfather's dance music by that time in some ways, but although I was still a huge fan. And then when Nightlife came out, I even saw them in concert with that, which was a special time. I took my girlfriend at the time, and my parents, I got my father really into Pet Shop Boys. It was his favorite band, and so me and my dad had a lot of connections with listening to Pet Shop Boys, a lot of special memories. I still can remember the day that I brought home Behavior on CD, and I must have played Being Boring like 15 times in a row, and I just couldn't wait till my dad got home so I could play in Behavior. So we went into the living room and next to the fireplace, and I just played that song for him, and he just sat there and he just loved it. And Being Boring, it became one of his favorite songs. And of any band, all the bands that I showed my father their music, Pet Shop Boys was his favorite. And when I wasn't looking and I saw my dad listening to Pet Shop Boys, or I came into his house and he was playing Pet Shop Boys, I was like, yes, like I'm so glad that Pet Shop Boys is my dad's favorite band. It was just, it was just kind of like a bond that we had, and my dad was always very respectful of understanding where Pet Shop Boys were coming from and their backgrounds and them being gay and what they were talking about, and like he was really in tune with what they were talking about, but also the nightlife and the electronic music and just dance music in general. He was always tied to that because I was always playing him different styles of dance music throughout the time when I was a kid. One of my favorite things to do, and one of the things I did often from when I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, all the way till I moved out of the house when I was 17 or 18, was playing my dad whatever new album I got that week, or playing my top 40 tracks that week, or playing him my favorite mixtape that I made that month or whatever it was. And he was always very patient, and he was always really enthusiastic about what I would play him. And it was, instead of us watching TV or playing ball, which we went out and throw a catch and played basketball and stuff like that. One of the best memories I have is him spending an hour or 2 hours a night and him just relaxing in my music room and me just playing music till he just finally said, "Oh, I gotta go to bed." It's like it's getting late, like, because we would just play music for hours, and it really what made me want to be a DJ, and because I saw the excitement on somebody else's face when you played music for him, and then it's sort of, I was doing mixtapes and I was DJing in my own right, and then in 1991, this album came out, and I saw the words DJ on a Pet Shop Boys album, and then I saw the equipment, and I was already kind of had the equipment. I had two turntables and a mixer, and that's when it clicked. That was like, I want to be a DJ. Like that's my hobby. I want to be a DJ. I already like playing music. Now I actually saw somebody. I was 15 years old. I saw a picture of somebody who I really looked up to in Chris Lowe and Neil Tennant in front of a DJ console, in front of studio full of really what to me at the time, being 15 years old, was like, wow, like what are those machines back there? I want to hear what they do. I want to play around with them. Like I was so excited, and that's kind of what led me going to recording school a couple years later when I was I guess I was 20 years old when I went to recording school, and that's kind of the evolution of Pet Shop Boys and how much they meant to me on a hobby level. Like, and that's not even talking about like how much I love their music and all kinds of things. But there was a time when I bought everything that I could from Pet Shop Boys. I was in their fan club. I would buy their posters. I was dressing like Chris Lowe. I was buying Stussy glasses and Stussy shirts and Champion hoodies and rolling up my jeans like him. And I wanted a London Fog jacket so I could look like So Hard, the cover on that album. And I was in their fan club. I bought every CD, every version, and every release that I could. Multiple formats. I still have most of my Pet Shop Boys, physical collection, which is very, very heavy. And it really changed at like Nightlife, and it's mostly not necessarily because of them so much as just me evolving and liking different music and sort of kind of going away from the disco kind of high energy synth pop that Pet Shop Boys were providing. But it was also them getting a little bit older, and then you really saw that in Home, whatever the 2001 album was, which is, this is funny. I can't even think of the album. I guess it was called Release. That's right. But the Home and Dry and London and some of those tracks just felt like although they were very catchy, and that's probably two of the better tracks on the album, and those were two singles, it was kind of like your adult contemporary dance version of Pet Shop Boys. It was not your One More Chance. It was not your Two Divided by Zero or Pananero or We All Feel Better in the Dark or Music for Boys or the Atom Splitting or all these great B-sides like New Life. And I was such a fan, all the way through like 96 when Alternative came out, and that collected all the B-sides. And I already had all the B-sides because I was buying everything that I could of theirs, but that kind of wrapped them all up and had a couple different versions on there and a couple of imports that I didn't necessarily have at the time. And I was just such a huge fan from 1986 to 1996. And then Bilingual came out, and there were some pretty good hip tracks on there. Metamorphosis, before it was a really strong track, including, if you've never heard the Denny Tenaglia remixes on the single before, those are fantastic and really kind of raw rhythmic tracks. And before I had which I think is one of their best singles, their last best single, in my opinion, just loved Before. But also there was some, Discoteca was on there, and, just some good dance versions of sort of the One More Chance, or different versions of the sort of dance versions of Pet Shop Boys alike. But then Bilingual came out, and I was kind of disappointed by the singles, to be honest with you. And I think the album started out well with For Your Own Good, which I think is another great opener of Pet Shop Boys. I love the anthem on it. In fact, it was the track that I saw them at I think it was the Universal Amphitheater in 1999, or it was 2000 in Southern California. And they came out with For Your Own Good, and that was my favorite song on the album at the time. It still is my favorite song on the album. So they come out with that album. I'm excited to see the Pet Shop Boys for the first time, because they're really only, I think they only ever came in America like 1989 on that tour. I don't think they came at any other time, and so to go see Pet Shop Boys was kind of like a capper, and sort of cap my I wouldn't say my career with them, but like my love of them was kind of like kind of put a lid on it, like see them live for the first time, and what would be the last time, since I've never seen them since. And so Pet Shop Boys up to that time, just to kind of finish that thought on my first of the four topics I wanted to talk about Pet Shop Boys, was they were so strong up to that time. I mean, I just collected everything. I was such a huge fan. And then you have what I call, which is kind of a side topic, but I feel it's necessary because I was going to mention it anyways. But I feel like I'll bring it up now. And one of the major topics is the downfall of the maxi single. Like for me, like when you think of like 1988 or you think of like Violator by Depeche Mode, you think of the singles like For Enjoy the Silence and World in My Eyes and Policy of Truth and Personal Jesus. You think of those mixes, like those fantastic mixes, and then those great B-sides. You almost had like, you had Violator, and then you almost had like two other albums worth of material that was just equally as good, some different versions of other songs you knew, but also some great B-sides and just other great versions of songs you already loved. And so I just collected so many maxi singles at the time, and sort of the reason why I really wanted to bring it up is because the downfall of maxi singles as the 90s went on was really sad, and Pet Shop Boys were a good example of a reason why the maxi singles in a lot of ways failed. And I mean, there was always a time when a band would put out an album, right? And you know, the label is looking to make extra money off it, put out different versions, you know, get it into the charts and sell a single, you know, especially as they saw the 80s, you know, go on, and you would see like Blue Monday, you know, it was all-time number one selling single, and you had all these big labels probably thinking like, that was the biggest single of the 80s, and you think of all the songs that were popular in the 80s, and Blue Monday, that it wasn't even a household song with everybody, that was the number one single. So labels started to see the importance of DJing, the importance of maxi singles, the importance of just selling singles in general. You could sell 1 million copies of single. How many copies do you think Vogue sold by Madonna? Like, I mean, just, you know, millions, probably a couple million just on a single. So not only are you making a ton of money off a multi-platinum album, but then you're also selling the singles. Probably those Depeche Mode singles, those 4 Depeche Mode singles, probably sold 2-3 million copies, I would say, probably equal to how many Violator sold. So, and they're just extra songs that are laying around, versions that the studio remixers and the producers and the engineers sort of put together extra versions of, and these were extra B-sides that were laying around. They packaged them up, put them out, and they're selling another 1 million copies. But for a fan of the bands, you were just like so excited to get a maxi single with all these new versions on, and then you looked at the remixers, you're like, oh, Francis Kevorkian remixes, oh, sweet. You looked at DJ Culture, you're like, oh, David Morales mixed this, oh, Little Louis Vega mixes, oh, Mark Saunders mixed this. You know what I mean? You got so excited about all, William Orbit, you know what I mean? You got so excited about all these great remixers that you were starting to see their names on different things, and then now looking back, you're like, oh, wow, they were, you know, William Orbit was in Bass-O-Matic and Strange Cargo, and then you know the history of the artist, but then they're doing remixes at the time at the side projects with the original material of the band, you know, and that was so exciting. And then it got to the point where there was maxi single only singles like DJ Culture. It wasn't even on an album, but yet it came out on singles, so you had to pay attention to the singles bands, the singles drawers, and where all the singles were in. That was the first place I would go, like 1988 to like 1995. I would go straight to the singles, because often a single would come out before the album. If an album came out, you knew a single was coming soon. You're like, okay, well, Personal Jesus came out. Okay, Enjoy the Silence came out. They got to put out a third or fourth single. So let's. Oh, great. Policy of Truth came out. Oh, okay. Then World in My Eyes came out. So you just were looking in the singles bin, and you were just so excited. And a lot of times they wouldn't have that many copies of the maxi singles, so you were super excited to get one. You knew Violator was out there. You knew you would go to the store and see 15 copies of Violator, but you weren't sure which singles you were out there. They didn't get 15 singles of Enjoy the Silence out there sitting. They had a couple. So you had to be one of the first ones to get it. So it was just such an exciting time. And that's what kind of led me to doing my own remixes. By the time I was like 11 or 12 years old in 1987, 88, I was taking the singles and making my own remixes of it. I would take all the remixes, edit my favorite parts, rewind it, elongate that that bridge and that instrumental or that intro, and then make my own version and make a whole 90-minute cassette with just remixes of World in My Eyes. And then I would make, even some remixes of the B-sides, like Sea of Sin and Happiest Girl. So it was just such an exciting time, like, to get more new music of bands you love and different versions, and then B-sides, demo versions, remixes again, and then also, specialty one-off singles. And what really led to the downfall of the maxi singles is the bands not being involved in them anymore. And then also the engineers, the original engineers, producers, and then the advent of the internet kind of killed the maxi singles. There was a time on maxi singles when the people who remixed them were the people involved in the recording sessions, right? So if you go to like Strangelove, for example, by Depeche Mode, you would see Dave Bascom did the producing, right? Then you would see who the engineers were, right? And then you would remember who the single was, and then you're like, okay, Mark Saunders did the remix for this. Okay, this person, Shep Pettibone did this remix. Oh, Alan Moulder did this remix. Okay, he was on the original sessions. Oh, that's fantastic. That means he's going to be using the original tapes. That means he was in the recording sessions for the most part. He engineering. He knows the ins and outs of that track, so he's able to do the edits on it. This is, probably even when you're probably at the end of splicing tape and adding different remixes. But for the most part, what really made those remixes exciting was they were generally extended versions or dub versions, and they were the original. They were the original reels a lot of the time, and they were original sounds from the original session, from the original band. And then as the 90s progressed, people started doing remixes where they put their own beat to it, and they would use samples of it. And then that went full on to the internet, where the whoever the remixer is not even in the studio doing their remix with the original stems or the original sounds, and they're doing their own beat to it. And then it got to the point where they were doing their whole remix, and that was exciting to some extent because they're whole different versions, right? But it lost the personal connection of that remixer with the original session. And a lot of those remixes were engineers, they were producers themselves. They weren't up and coming like electronic sort of producers. And this is a great example of it. Like when this Nightlife came out, right? This I don't know what you want, but I can't take it anymore, right? But I can't give it anymore. What a long song that is. It's always funny how many long songs or Pet Shop Boys have in there. Like how can you expect to be taken seriously? Like the song probably failed in the charts just because because people are that lazy to even say it on the radio and introduce the track. But so you have this remix come out here, right? And I mean, just the remixers on here. I mean, I don't like to talk bad about people, but Thunderpush 2000's remixing this. Chubbawamba's mixing this. This New York City boy, these remixes. There was a David Morales mix on here that was pretty good, but Super Chumbo remixing the Pet Shop Boys. I think this one had another really couple bombs on there that was really horrible on here too. I don't have my glasses on to see who remixed this one, but just disappointing. And I was buying everything from Pet Shop Boys at the time. So when this came out, I never bought a single again from Pet Shop Boys. I was so disappointed, and I could see the writing on the wall. And it wasn't Pet Shop Boys wasn't the only one I was seeing this was. Depeche Mode was the same way. They were just not involved in the remixes anymore. They didn't care. They were out doing their own thing. They were whatever. Like, I think it was a lot of the labels' fault too. They're like, oh, we got this. They're like, oh, okay, have the hippest new producers that do electronic music, have them remixes instead of people that were on the sessions, people that were engineers, people that were producers. No, I was going to some still fairly good producers, but not remixers. Like I think of, like, at the time, a fantastic song like "It's No Good" by Depeche Mode. This is a prime example. All right, the people that did the remixes for "It's No Good," right? It was Richie Houghton, Richie Houghton, I think, did it. Um, Ashley Beadle did it. She's kind of I think she does like electro and stuff. I know the name, but I never really followed her. I think she did electro and stuff like that. That wasn't good. There was another version that wasn't good. It was just like all these hit producers would remix their stuff, and then you got on to the next Depeche Mode album. Dream On has some pretty good remixes on it. That was one of the last Depeche Mode remixes that I liked because it had Lalo and Bushwhacker remixing it, and also who was doing some good tech house, and then I think Thomas Brinkman, who I was a big fan of his at that time because Martin Gore got into a lot of minimal techno at the time, and so he knew who Thomas Brinkman was. And so, every album by these bands seemed to have remixes by whoever's kind of hip at the time, whether it be some crap artist like Fortet or Skrillex or all these crappy Marshmello or, all these lame EDM artists that are garbage, who turn Pet Shop Boys songs into dubstep and horrible sounding EDM garbage. I just, like, Home and Dry was a great example of them just ruining track. Home and Dry, pretty good Pet Shop Boys song. Very catchy. Not my ideal Pet Shop Boys song, but still very catchy and a worthy single and a good song. Good chorus. The remixes, they took Cher at the time, which was really popular in her remix of Believe, and the auto-tune craze that started with Believe by Cher, if you know the song. They put the remixes on that and did some kind of crazy auto-tunes with Home and Dry for every Pet Shop Boys remix of that track. And I just wanted to never hear that track again. That was just kind of an example of how the maxi single died because the remixes sucked. Sorry. And the B-sides were not that good anymore. It was kind of case by case basis. Some of the B-sides weren't good, but Depeche Mode, for example, the B-sides, no comparison from the late 80s, early 90s. When you think of like Dangerous and Sea of Sin and My Joy, like the B-sides in the later 90s, and they were kind of instrumentals, Painkiller, and anyways, I digress. But that's kind of my overall. Maybe I'll do a different video on the fall of the maxi single, but that's kind of my thoughts on why the maxi single was so great, but also why it died. Alright, so the third thing I want to talk about was the actual tracks on here. So for your own good, I won't give out the score though, because I'll leave that for the video. You can see my score on top of each track. I'll just give you my overall thoughts. You'll probably guess, maybe you can guess what my score is for my overall, what I'm talking about when I mention each song, or my enthusiastic or lack of enthusiasm with each track that comes on this album. But for your own good, I think Pet Shop Boys always did a great job of having a really strong dance song come out. You think of like 2 Divided by 0, One More Chance, At Night. Like, Here's No Difference. For Your Own Good, super strong track. My favorite song of the album right away. It's just exciting. Like when Pet Shop Boys albums start, it's just really exciting. Like when you heard Being Boring fade in. Like, this is the same thing, For Your Own Good. It goes really good with the title of the album, Nightlife. Like this really captures the sound of club music in 1999. Like this, it's a little bit trancey, it's a little bit techno, it's deep, it's anthem, it's atmospheric, it's catchy, it's driving. It's all about what Nightlife is about. For Your Own Good, super strong track. My favorite of the album. And then you get to track number 2, Closer to Heaven. I think it's a good follow-up song overall. Pretty good chorus. I like the piano. I'm reading my notes here, so bear with me. Slightly hurt by the auto-tune. Like kind of touched on that, the late 90s and the birth of auto-tune. God, don't we wish that never happened. But Closer to Heaven sort of had that a little bit into it. Kind of, I don't know, it doesn't age that good, and it didn't sound that good at the time. It just kind kind of sounds kind of whiny and tinny. Just never liked the auto tune to begin with, even before it got done to death by popular music and hip hop and stuff like that, R&B. Just probably one of the worst things that's ever happened in the music industry was people feeling like auto tune was a good thing to do. Yeah, let's make our voice sound like shit. Yeah, that's great. Rant over. Closer to Heaven, yeah. Hence the name. It's also a good representation of nightclub music at the time. It kind of sounds like a B-side though. Closer to Heaven kind of sounds like a B-side, but a good song overall. And then the single, I don't know what you want, but I can't give it anymore. I think it's a good track. A bit more disco. It's got some good electronic sounds in here. The verses are good. Neil's voice is really smooth here, like on the verses especially. The chorus is a little bit long-winded with the title. It's kind of like, it's kind of like hard to sing, but like, I don't know. It's just maybe a different, maybe not say the title of the song in the chorus would have been a better idea. I don't know, but it's a pretty smooth song, and it's a solid single overall. Again, horrible remixes. Track number 4, Happiness is an Option. It has some charm to it. There's some interesting tracks that are kind of catchy on this album, but they are not just kind of the next level Pet Shop Boys. They're kind of like, you might have like a depending on your like of Pet Shop Boys song, there's some like that you might think are kind of clever and kind of catchy and sort of whimsical, and I certainly have that in my history with Pet Shop Boys. There's some songs I like that are maybe not considered singles or considered classic songs or even well-liked cult songs, but they're kind of like the next tier, but you kind of like them a lot because you kind of go to the album and you play those a little bit less because you like them as much and they're not as overplayed as some of the other songs maybe. Like, there's a lot of those songs in here depending on what your liking of Pet Shop Boys. Me, I'm kind of indifferent to a lot of them, and it kind of hurts the album for me. Happiness is an Option, I think, has some charm to it. It's kind of catchy chorus, but in some respects it's kind of lackluster. The beat is down tempo, the vocals are sort of lo-fi, but it's not great. The strings on this song and the strings on the album are actually one of the high points of the album for me as far as the production. Although they sound a little bit more digital than the warmer sounds of older strings on Pet Shop Boys. Just the difference of analog, and this is more into the digital side of Pet Shop Boys, and that's a big crux for me as well, because that's the reason why I like the older analog Pet Shop Boys albums. Just more warmer, and that's a whole nother video I could do on Pet Shop Boys. Just an hour rant on digital versus analog Pet Shop Boys production, and especially with them live. Happiness Option is a pretty good track. You Only Tell Me You Love Me When You're Drunk. Another one with a really long title. Never understood the appeal with this track. And it was a single. That song was the last. That one I didn't even buy. So you're talking about a downfall of a band in some ways in this track. Although I still think it was a good album, don't get me wrong. But you talk about going from loving and waiting for every Pet Shop Boys single to come in every version. Oh, I just had the maxi single. Oh, let me get the single because it has the 7-inch edit on there, or it has, slightly different remixes on. Oh, I'm so excited! That's my pick of the month. Like, going from there to never buying a single again, a maxi single, to the very third single on the album, to not even buying the single of the album. That's how much Nightlife was a microcosm, and not just of them, but killing the maxi single for me in that period of like 1997 to 2002. As far as like synth pop and new wave and now maxi singles were 12-inch. That's a whole different story. I mean, like techno and house and stuff, that stuff was still going strong, and I don't think techno and house and the electronic community get enough respect. And thank you for keeping vinyl alive. I'll do a whole another video on that someday, and I'm sure you guys, you hardcore vinyl and electronic music lovers, will appreciate that rant, because if it weren't for that, you would not have your freaking reissues of Billy Joel and all this BS that's coming out nowadays. Without the electronic music, without the DJ, the hip hop community, for the most part, did not keep vinyl alive. So, respect to the electronic scene, respect to the electronic DJ for keeping vinyl alive through some very lean years, from like 2002 especially to like 2010. I digress. But you only tell me you love me drunk. So I didn't even buy the single again. I feel like Neil Tennant's taking the piss on the song. I honestly do. The Hawaiian guitar. It's no. Pet Shop Boys can really get away with, I have this written down. Pet Shop Boys can really get away with making anything poppy and catchy, and they do a great song of it. But you have to draw the line somewhere. This song, I had to draw the line somewhere. It almost sounds like a Broadway play or something, or like some kind of like, I don't know, Pet Shop Boys were sort of getting into the plays by the late 90s and early 2000s with the soundtracks that they did to plays and being involved in like Broadway and stuff like that, and just plays in general. But this track, just no, I'm sorry. One of the worst Pet Shop Boys songs, the worst Pet Shop Boys song up to that point. I mean, there might have been a B-side. I can think of like Hit and Miss. That was a B-side to like Before. That was a really bad song. But this is the worst song on any Pet Shop Boys album up to this point. Just can't. I don't think I've ever heard it. Probably since the first time I've heard it. Maybe I tried it the second time. I didn't even play it all the way through in rating it because I know it's just very low in general. But yeah, it's not a good song. Track number 6, Vampires. In some ways, it's kind of a hip beat. Hip beat. I should put the quotations up. Hip beat. Like, this kind of has Pet Shop Boys doing a hip beat and sort of down tempo, and actually it went over pretty well live. Like, I remember watching it live and sort of liking the song. It's kind of, but again, sort of like Happiness is an Option. It's just kind of underwhelming. It's kind of catchy, but it's not really the Pet Shop Boys I look for. I've been kind of doing. I did that with Peter Murphy on my last video. If you guys saw my last video, like some bands do certain songs. Like if I was to think of Pet Shop Boys, they do like they do a few different versions. You know, they have ballads. They do upbeat dance songs. They do, you know, some sort of maybe different songs, like different dance songs, different styles. Like some are really anthemic, like Go West or New York City Boy, or you know what I mean. And then some are sort of like your sort of synth pop ones that are straightforward, like Love Comes Quickly or Suburbia or stuff like that. You know what I mean? And then they did ballads and stuff like that. But I don't know where some of these tracks fit in. Like Vampires. Like, I appreciate them doing, like, some different stuff and stuff. That kind of started on Bilingual, I think, a little bit, because was still a very dancey album, for the most part. But with Vampires, just, I don't know where them doing, like, a sort of a hip-hop beat, that just doesn't work for me. But it's a pretty good song. I'm being honest, but at the same time, I still feel like Pet Shop Boys can write so many catchy songs, but it's just not to the level that I put Pet Shop Boys song on. And I have to be honest when I critique some bands, and Pet Shop Boys, unfortunately, depending on my day, can get the full brunt of it. In other days, I'm like, well, at least it's catchy, and I'm kind of more like that today, I suppose, than kind of going in on them, because there's some Pet Shop Boys albums. I'll be frank with you, I've never even heard. Like, I haven't heard Super. I don't think I heard. I think I heard Electric, but I stopped buying Pet Shop Boys albums after. I think the one that had Minimal, Fundamental. I think in 2007. I stopped buying Pet Shop Boys albums after that. So, my love for Pet Shop Boys got from waiting on bended knee for the new album to come out, getting every single, to not buying maxi singles, to not buying singles. And then by the later 2000s, not even buying the albums. Like, that's kind of where And most of that is because I'm into other music and I buy a lot of music anyway. And you factor in 1992 versus having the internet at your fingertips and going to record stores, and by that I didn't even have a license in 1991. I didn't drive to 1992. So you're talking about going to a record store once a week, which that was my favorite thing to do as far back as I was like 8 years old. So in any spare time, anytime out with my grandparents or they wanted to buy me something or treat me, I was like, let's go to the record store. Like I want to get a new I want to get a new album. I want to see what's there. But like I was buying so much stuff, but by the 90s and 2000s, there's so many things I'm interested in. There's so many new styles that I've kind of gotten into over the last 15 years, of the early 90s all the way through middle 2000s, that I'm just buying so much music, and my interests are just elsewhere. But I'm still, I'm there for Pet Shop Boys if something's good. And I'll be honest with you, when 2009 came out, I'm not sure when I got that album, but that was one of their better albums, and there was some really good tracks on that, and it kind of rejuvenated my interest in Pet Shop Boys. I can't think of it was called Yes, the one with the check mark. And When in Rome, love that track. There was a couple other tracks on there. Some ones that sort of sounded like opportunities, like the main song for Yes. But then again, the next couple albums. I think the only album I have after Yes is, I think I have Asylum and maybe Electric. Or, I think I have like 2 albums out of the last like 7. Like that's where my love for Pet Shop Boys and following them is just kind of, it's just because, maybe that's a whole nother video in itself. And I knew this would be a long video, but I think it would be this long. But my Pet Shop Boys just are older now, and they're just not tight. And so I'm gonna come a little bit on that, on the hip part of that, the last thing I'll talk about. So I'll save that to the end. But that could be a whole nother video all in itself. Anyways, let's get to the good stuff. Track number 7, Radiophonic. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I want to hear from Pet Shop Boys. I want to hear a cool sounding electronic sound that is catchy and it reminds me of like Music for the Boys or DJ Culture, or is very hip and it's very catchy, and like Chris Lowe is singing on it. It's great to DJ and it's very clever, and it sounds futuristic. Like that's what I loved about Pet Shop Boys. When you played Please and you heard Opportunities for the first time, nothing else sounded like it. Like they were combining Italo disco with freestyle music, and then they were doing hip hop on top of it, and it was synth pop. Like boom, like Pet Shop Boys had arrived. And then you could tell they're influenced by disco, and then they were into the DJ community and supporting nightlife and house music like they did on It's Alright, and all the great songs through Introspective, all the great extended remixes, and you knew they were tied to the electronic underground because they were doing like acid house remixes of Always on My Mind, which was the #1 song. I mean, what other #1 song, even here in America, had a B-side that had an acid house remix in 1988? That was just game-changing. Like, and Pet Shop Boys did that, right? And you go to the point where they're just out of touch with what's going on in electronic music. Like, that's how it felt for me, because I was really tied to electronic music because of bands like the Pet Shop Boys. And I was really onto the tip of the underground and knowing what was coming out. And then you heard some of these Pet Shop Boys albums, and you're just like, they're just not into it anymore. They're just, I guess they've gotten old, and they're just not paying attention to what's out there. But then also I have some qualms about the digital side of what the Chris Lowe uses versus, the vintage stuff sounds great when you're using like Fairlights and emulators and Oberheims and Moogs and stuff like that. Although, I don't think they used any Moogs, but they were using some super cool gear, a lot of Rolands. You can definitely see a lot of the cool equipment on here. They're using a TIAC in the back here. I don't have my glasses on here, but there's an Eventide here, which is a great sampler. Looks like they got some looks like a Space Echoes right there, old Space Echo box from the 70s, which is a great piece of gear, which is super expensive. I'm trying to remember who came out. Was it Moog who came out with the Space Echo? I'm forgetting who came out with the Space Echo. Anyways, that was a great piece of gear. So you can sort of see them on and some of the gear, and that's what got me excited about like going to recording school and stuff, so I could play with some of those equipment. And somehow, somewhere along the line, like Chris Lowe just got into the digital stuff, and to me that was kind of boring. Like hearing, like getting into programs and stuff like that, and Reason and even some of the I'm blanking on the new one that Robert, or the newer one that Robert Hankey from Monolake invented, which is the most popular program one. I'm blanking on the name right now. That's going to bother me. But anyway, it's just, digital programs and digital files, and that thing doesn't really excite me on a suite of sounds. Like, that doesn't really inspire me. But playing on old gear, like, that stuff is cool. So Radiophonic, I really like that track. Good verses, good beat, some cool techno sounds on there. Reminds me of Music for the Boys. I'm all about it. This is cool. Track number 8, The Only One. I really like the piano on it. The Pet Shop Boys do well with this kind of song in general. Like when you think of Only the Wind, great song, right? Face the Truth, great song. Do I Have to? Oh, what a great song that is. Like, the Pet Shop Boys do some really good. What's that other one? Doesn't matter, or doesn't have to. It was on Actually. I know Do I Have to is, I think it was the B side, right? But it doesn't matter, or it's the name of the movie that they did on Actually, which is the video is in Always on My Mind when they're in the car. God, I can't think of that. Is it Doesn't Matter, or I can't think of it. Maybe it is. No, it's not Do I Have to. God, I can't think of the name of that song. Anyways, it's on Actually. And so they do some great songs like this. Only One is kind of in that vein. Unfortunately, it doesn't live up to that level of those, but it's still a good song, and the lyrics are pretty clever, and Neil does a good job in singing on this one. But the end goes on way too long on this song. Wow, the last 2 minutes are really a bear. And then the album really struggles from here on out. Boy Strange, Neil playing acoustic guitar. I'm sorry. Do that in your own house. Do that on a B-side. I don't care, but nobody wants to hear Neil Tennant sing acoustic guitar on a Pet Shop Boys album. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that if Neil was ever watching this, if I carry this to my grave, because I'm one of the biggest Pet Shop Boys fans for a long time, I'm sorry. I just can't get into it. Acoustic guitar, Neil Tennant singing. Sorry. But it's okay, I guess. I mean, he still made it catchy. I guess some people might like the song. I don't know. And then In Denial. Even worse. Just not for me. I almost don't have an opinion on it. Like, at this point, I'm kind of like playing the album. Like, I think of all the Pet Shop Boys albums that I actually have, which, again, I only have like 2 after 2009. Yes, that was like the last one. But LCM, and I think I have Electric. I think I have 2 of the albums after, yes. Maybe it's only 1. I can't remember. Again, I thought I have 2, but maybe I just have 1. But I just, this album I was listening to, and I was scoring a couple days ago when I was getting ready to do this video. And I just, at this point, I like listening to the album, I was kind of like dozing off. I was like, why am I reviewing this again? Why am I listening to this again? Oh yeah, I'm reviewing it. Man, it's hard not to get negative about some of the Pet Shop Boys albums. And some of the songs, they just don't really connect with. I don't think they really connect with anybody. I won't say anybody, but if you have a critique bone in your body, if you have an opinion, you can't like some of these Pet Shop Boys songs. You can't. I know there's some catchy songs in there. I'll touch on it in just a second and show you an example of that. I feel like I'm pretty reasonable, but In Denial, that's not a good song. And I can see why this album hardly gets played on a full listen when I hear Boy Strange and then In Denial, and then New York City Boy. No, New York City Boy, one of their worst singles to this point, followed by the worst single The one that I can't love you because I'm drunk or whatever, or you only love me because you're drunk. Like that's the worst single ever. Followed up by their worst, one of their worst disco songs of all time, New York City Boy. No, I was not a fan of Go West. Remixes were okay, but that was some of the remixes on Very on the on some of those singles. You could sort of see the cracks were showing in the maxi singles, even back '94. The remixes to I wouldn't normally do this type of thing. Sasha remix, okay. I think DJ Pierre Wild Pitch, he has the best remix of. I wouldn't normally do this type of thing. The third single I'm blanking on. It was Go West. Yeah, the remixes weren't that good. It was like Farley and Heller. They were meh. But then the first single, Can You Forgive Her? Those remixes are cool. The Rolo dub, the Rolo mix, MK, Mark Kitchen doing the remixes on those. Those are good. You know, those are raw remixes of a cool and different track. Go West, not a fan. New York City Boy, not a fan. I just can't get into it. Can't get into it. So I'll tell you where Footsteps, the last track on here, track number 12. I think it's a good song. It has kind of a 90s, a 70s haze to it, very disco, kind of very Studio 54, I feel like. Catchy vocals for sure. But that's the last track on it. I give it a 6. I forgot that I'm not supposed to give my scores. You guys can see them over the tracks, but I did give Footsteps. I thought it was a good track. So I'm like, I feel like I'm understanding, even when their songs aren't my style, but they're still catchy and they still are playable and listenable. There's like 3 tracks on here that I don't even want to play. And they're right in a row too. That kind of kills the album for me. So sorry to go on so long on this video. I hope you don't mind. I'm sure if you're a big Pet Shop Boys fan, you might be enjoying this video, but otherwise you're probably nobody's watching this, and I'm okay with that because I do treat my channel like a diary, and I'm kind of having a good conversation about, because this album Nightlife, it ties to the fall of Pet Shop Boys in my opinion. You know, I have to be honest, and Bilingual, you saw the cracks, but it still had some good singles like before. Say Vidi, whatever it was. And then the other singles weren't too bad too. It was Red Letter Day and I can't remember the other single on there, but they were pretty good. But Discotheque on there was pretty good, and there was a couple other songs near the beginning that were pretty good. Discotheque, and the other one, I can't remember what it was. Anyways. Yeah, they were Bilingual. You know, there were some good tracks on there. It was sort of dancey and edgy, and you know, before kind of was like in the middle of the album, and it kind of helped carry it to the lighter tracks. And there was this, you know, some of the, like Saturday Forever, I think was kind of a pretty good disco track to end it, but again, not my style. But Nightlife kind of was another Bilingual, but just didn't get there. And unfortunately, it's one of my least favorite Pet Shop Boys album, but you know, we'll see when I review each one where some of these albums sit post Nightlife, because I'm scared to review them, to be honest with you. I don't want to be negative, but I do want to review their albums, and there will be some times and some tracks where I don't know them. You know, there's probably every album I know 1 or 2 tracks on, but I've never heard most of the albums after 2010, which I think is about 5. And you know, the last one, nonetheless, I reviewed it for an online publication, and unfortunately, you know, they pay me to be positive on those, so unfortunately, I have to swallow my pill and just, you know, just kind of, yeah, this is, you know, but I don't go overboard because I don't like it, you know. Nonetheless, whatever that last album was, from what I heard of it, which was most of it, no. Not good. So I'm not looking forward to feeling like I'm gonna be negative about Pet Shop Boys album, but I will get to them. But this can be one of the least like Pet Shop Boys albums Unfortunately, I give it a 53 out of 100. I think it's a pretty good album. I'll say that, but it's on the low side and it's disappointing. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to play Nightlife and kind of enjoy it on a different level. I never get through it because the last handful of tracks aren't very good and the singles don't really carry it. And there's really no, besides Radiophonic and For Your Own Good, there's really not much on there as far as the exciting Pet Shop Boys sound that used to be exciting that I still really like in retrospect in a nostalgic way. This album just doesn't really have that for me. And I don't think I've ever played these B-sides. Maybe that's what I should do. I should give these a chance and see, but I'm not thinking that I'll like any of these at all. Like Chumbawamba remixes, Thunderpuss 2000. You got me mixed up with somebody else. You think I'm gonna like Chumbawamba remixes of Pet Shop Boys? That's some garbage. Like I don't even really have to hear him to know that's garbage. Like that's some crap. Like who you go from people like DJ Pierre and Sasha and Farley and Heller and all these great remixers, and then you got Chumbawamba remixing. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this video, this part shouldn't be long, so bear with me. And because I feel like this is important for the Pet Shop Boys and their evolution of their sound. Like Pet Shop Boys have always, for the most part, well, it depends on your opinion, but I think some of you will agree with me and some of you will understand my opinion. And also think for the most part they did, and for the most part I think they did. They've always tied to what's going on in dance music and been able to combine that with their creative writing and catchiness and good singing, good. I know not everybody likes Neil Tennant's voice. I get it. Like some people, it's like chalk on a like fingernails on a chalkboard. I get it. Not everybody is a fan of Neil Tennant's voice. I think his voice is very underrated, but I understand the critiques on his voice. It doesn't have always a pleasant voice, and it's an interesting tone that doesn't always go with stuff. I get it, but Pet Shop Boys have always been very good and very, very strong about tying their style to whatever's going on. When you go back to Please and you think of them coming out, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe grew up out of disco music and all the great music of late 70s. Probably a slight half generation before me. Like they were already kind of, they're like 10 years older than me. Well, actually, I'm sorry, they're a little bit older than that. They're like 20 years older than me. I forgot Neil Tennant's like almost 70, right? He's a little older. I think Neil Tennant's like 65. So they're kind of in the next generation of mine, but I feel older because I got into music when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So I always feel like I'm tied to the older generation of like people that are in their 50s, 60s, and very early 70s with dance music, because I feel like I'm from the disco era. Like I grew out of, my first album was Blondie. Like so I came up when hip hop was coming out. I came out when punk was coming out, as far as liking music and new wave and synth pop and all the great music like Italo disco and stuff. So when Pet Shop Boys came out, Italo disco tied with disco, with their version of synth pop, also doing hip hop, right? So they tied very strongly to what was coming out, right? Fast forward to Introspective, let's say, right? That next period. Actuality was sort of a bridge over that into some disco, but still kind of a Please too in a way, but still carrying on some hits. Introspective, you know what I mean? They tying themselves to acid house music. The early acid house generation, right? Verging on rave music, even to Music with Boys, some of the B-sides on there, some of the remixes, the techno pop version of I Want a Dog, right? A techno remix of one of their tracks, right? An acid house remix of Always on My Mind, right? Their remixes, their B-sides, they were tying on to what's going on in electronic music. Still through the early 90s. Then they went to Vary, tying themselves to like techno and progressive house, even into a little bit of rave and electronic music. Like that's Pet Shop Boys tying into the Vary. But then as the '90s went on, 2000s, they didn't tie themselves on to. They didn't really understand what was going on in those generations in the last 20, 25 years. Like, maybe they did on these remixes a little bit because, like, Home and Dry, like I was saying earlier, like they did, like, auto-tune and stuff. So maybe thought they were being hip with that and sort of doing Home and Dry with the auto-tune on the remixes, like Share and Believe. But no. But, so as they got older and they didn't tie themselves as well to know what's going on with electronic music and dance music and staying hip to what was going on in the culture, I think their album suffered because of it. Like you could say like Behavior in some ways tied to maybe like some early trip hop. Maybe, it's kind of more of a jazzy album in some ways. It's sort of I think it's more of like an adult contemporary, but it's got some dance songs on there, but it's electronic and, it's got some different types of Pet Shop Boys songs, but it's sounding them maturing. So I don't know if that album and this that really tied to any kind of thing that was going on in dance music at the particular time, but that's considered their best album by a lot of people. So that was kind of them doing their own thing. Every album after Nightlife, I will say Release sounds a little bit different, but every album seems to be like a Release or a Nightlife. Like, in a lot of ways, I feel like they've continued to tie themselves with disco music. And when I was growing up through the 90s and looking, wanting to hear what was going on in techno clubs, and I was starting to DJ techno and house music and stuff like that, and all the great dance music that was coming on, even jungle and drum and bass, and I was expecting to hear like a drum and bass Pet Shop Boys song or an ambient Pet Shop Boys song, but you kind of like, if they were able to do that with Behavior, what do you think would happen if Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe were like, we're going to do an album like Portishead or Massive Attack or you know what I mean, like or Air, or we're going to do a more trippy album and not do pop disco songs, right? What would have happened? Like, have they ever done that? They've probably done it on a couple songs here and there, but I just feel like every album after Bilingual has just been kind of Pet Shop Boys doing disco music, Pet Shop Boys doing disco music, Pet Shop Boys doing a ballad, Pet Shop Boys doing disco music, and it's just those weren't always my favorite versions of the Pet Shop Boys song. The best Pet Shop Boys, in my opinion, was them in some ways. Not Suburbia, but the album from the song from Introspective. I just happen to have the album here, so I didn't plan this. Left to My Own Devices, right? Here's an original copy of Introspective. Left to My Own Devices, right? Whatever he says, Che Guevara to a disco beat. Like, that's what Pet Shop Boys were, right? Like, they were doing orchestral music or melodic music or big sounding melodies and to disco beat. Like, that's what they've always done. But I'm afraid to say that that was cool back in 1988, but Pet Shop Boys doing disco music in 2022 for like 50 years now, almost the same style of music. Like, I just kind of wish they would have kind of evolved, maybe try some different things. They still have had some good songs here and there for sure, but I don't know if I'll ever rate any of their albums over a 70. Besides, I still need to do Introspective, which will be an interesting review. I gotta do Bilingual, so there might be a few 60s in there, but I'm not positive about reviewing and being negative about Pet Shop Boys albums after 1997. But we'll see. We'll get there eventually, right? We'll eventually get there. I'll probably do another Pet Shop Boys album review every couple months, unless one of you guys want wants to make a donation and wants me to review a certain album or even a certain song by Pet Shop Boys. But that's my overall thoughts of Bilingual and Pet Shop Boys during that time. But I guess the last thing I wanted to say was that to end that last conversation was just I felt like Pet Shop Boys are really strong for the most part in tying themselves to what was going on in the community. Like if you think of like Domino Dancing and the video, and it's kind of doing its own thing, right? Telling a story of of a love triangle, right? And then lover scorn and stuff. It's just, it's the theme of Pet Shop Boys songs in a lot of ways. But what did you see Chris Lowe in the back, right? He was DJing, right? He was at a party, right? He was part of the dance community, right? Like he was hip, right? And now I don't know. And I understand they're in their 60s and 70s. I'm not expecting them to have like Mickey Mouse gloves and be in a rave in the 90s, but I feel like there's been so many things going on in electronic music over the last 25, 30 years. I feel like Pet Shop Boys could have benefited from a good producer that could have steered them to using their talents and hopefully use some analog equipment. And man, if I had one dream of Pet Shop Boys, is put Chris Lowe and Neil Tennant in an old studio from 1988 and let them use old equipment and see what happens. I would love to hear it. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. I don't want to hear Chris Lowe on the latest workstation doing new music. I just think it sounds tinny. It sounds contrived. It sounds... I mean, if you're going to do disco music and you're not using vintage sounds, how disco is that? Is it a new version or a hipper version of disco? I don't know. I didn't think I was going to go this deep into this review and Pet Shop Boys in general, but it's something that's long been coming. Like the more you get to some certain bands that I have a love, I won't say a love-hate relationship. I will always love Pet Shop Boys. They'll always mean a lot to me, as well as Depeche Mode and stuff like that. But there's some bands like those that I could give a serious rant to on the direction of their career. And I just would have to be 100% honest and just be like, man, just talk about falling asleep at the wheel. Falling asleep at the wheel. Like Depeche Mode. Falling asleep at the wheel. Dave Gahan, give back Depeche Mode to the people. Give it back. It's not all yours. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Nightlife. I just feel disappointed in giving them a negative review. I feel like, it's 53 out of 100. It's not all negative. But I feel sad, like, just giving them a negative review in general. I don't want to, because I could praise Pet Shop Boys all the time. But if I don't think positively of the album, that's why I have to give a positive or a honest review of me being negative about it. Alright, anyways, we'll go on to the next video. Hope to see you on the next video. If there's something that you would like me to review, past or present, album or single, my email's down below. Please message me and I will get back to you. And hopefully I can review something that you'd like me to hear my review about. Alright, thanks so much. We'll see you.
Fire anger. blame or another assault on how it was. Then we'll get to the fact that it's always my fault, just because you're breaking my heart. Don't know what you want, but I can't feel it anymore. Don't know what you want, but I can't feel it anymore. Don't know what you want, but I can't it over when your war's over? Is it junk? You only tell me you love me when you're drunk. You only tell me you love me when you're drunk. Brother, don't matter. Sister, don't worry. Say what you like, I'll do what you want me to do. You're a vampire, I'm a vampire too. Sun in the kitchen, boys still sleeping. When you get hungry, I'll do what you want me to do. You're a vampire, I'm a vampire too. You're a vampire, I'm a vampire too. wonder who you are and what's your line. I wonder if there's someone else, or if it's true that I'm the only one in your life. I only worry for your sake. I don't know much about the deals you make. There's so much that you hide from me. The mystery. Am I the only one? The only one. The only one. The only one. The only one. I don't know you, you don't know me. I stuck now, and then you smile, and suddenly I know you care, and I'm the only one for a while. You've many reasons to tell me a lie. I cannot believe it, but I should be for you, and you for me, the only one. The only one. The only one. As enigmatic as you can be, I'm not suspicious naturally. There's so much that you hide from me, a mystery. Am I the only one in your life? You've many reasons to tell me a lie. I cannot believe it, that I should be for you, and you for me, the only one. Sea boy strange on the horizon of love, he's calling to you. What do you say? Sea boy strange as an example of youth, so close to the truth, but still far away.
Such a strange boy, to think you'll make me good as strange for the wonderful closed door that you left behind.
When you realize that this boy is strange, it's too late to change your point of view. He's often there when the sun meets the sky, with a perfect alibi, unlike you.
And he's such a strange boy, to think you'll make me good as strange for the
crimes to commit. In the eyes of the world, he's a borderline fool, both naive and cruel. Why would you inflict him on you? I'm not denying that every little bit hurts. It's a problem that I'm not solving. Don't mind admitting I feel like quitting this job for a while, getting away before it gets any worse today. You're days are tough, lying on your bed playing punk rock and stuff. Home is a boot camp, you gotta escape. Wanna go and wander in the ticker tape. You feel the deal, it's real. You're a New York City boy, so young, so wrong. Into New York City. New York City boy, you'll never have a bored day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. The street is amazing, the hoochie's unreal. Check out all the hardware at the latest deal. Hear a song, that's the bomb. If you don't get the mix, it's got 86. You feel the deal, it's real. You're in New York City. New York City boy, you'll never have a bored day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. New York City boy, this is your reward day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. You feel the deal is real. You're a New York City boy, so young, so wrong. Into New York City. New York City boy, you'll never have a bored day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. New York City boy, this is your reward day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. New York City boy, you'll never have a bored day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. New York City boy, this is your reward day, 'cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway. 'Cause you're a New York City boy, where 7th Avenue meets Broadway.
Footsteps in the dark, and the love will break your heart. Footsteps
long as I hear your footsteps in the dark, that's all I need.
Footsteps in the dark, and the love will break your heart. Footsteps, footsteps.
Loneliness and useless fear, like waves against a ramshackle pier. When thunder and rain scar the window pane, once again I want you near. As long as I hear your footsteps in the dark, that's all I need. I'm longing to see you. I want you, I need you. Like a child who feels afraid of the dark at night, hoping to hear the gentle touch turning on a welcome light. As long as I